Well, welcome back. I know that both my mom and dad visited the local area here in the early 30s, and it no doubt planted a seed. They moved my brother Malcolm and I down to San Clemente about 30 years later in 1962, just in time to enter first grade. Now, I've added color to the following images in hopes of bringing them to life and making them a bit more relatable. In this 1889 map of the recently incorporated Orange County, you can see the railroad finally made its way down to the coast. This map shows the failed boomtown of San Juan by the Sea, and it must have been made in 1887 when the rail line terminated there. The town may have evaporated, but some of the streets and street names survived. Here's the short-lived San Juan by the Sea train station, probably taken shortly after its completion in 1887. The following year, they completed laying the tracks along the coast to San Diego. Now, in this close-up of that map, you can see the rail lines along the coast in the area that would later become San Clemente. Those of you that live in Forster Ranch might recognize your namesake there. Here's a shot of my brother Malcolm and I hiking in the backcountry, as we called it. The fact that neither Malcolm nor I were gored by a steer or eaten by a mountain lion still baffles me. In 1888, they completed laying tracks south along the beach. This aerial photograph was probably taken around 1924 by either Ole Hansen or Hamilton Cotton. On the right side of the photo, you see T Street Canyon with the future pier bowl there on the left. Here's that same area about a year later when Ole Hansen began grading the roads for his vision of a Spanish village by the sea. You can see Avenida Victoria winding up the hill on the right. At that time, the train was really the only practical way to travel up and down the coast. Now, when Ole Hansen first arrived to begin grading, Frank Forster still had cattle grazing on the land. Ole Hansen's son recalled that they were quickly herded south by Forster to the county line by San Onofre. Now, this next photograph was taken where El Camino Real and Del Mar intersect. As the story goes, Del Mar was originally a wagon trail that Ole Hansen discovered leading down to the beach and Pier Bowl area. Del Mar has remained a gathering place in town to this day. They still hold the annual homecoming parade there. They shut down the street. What other town does that locally? Now, this aerial photo must have been taken in 1927. El Camino Real can be seen at the top with the Ole Hansen sales office visible where it meets Del Mar. If you follow Del Mar towards the beach, you can see the San Clemente Social Club, now the community center in town. Now, Ole Hansen's son told me in an interview back in 1974 that his father actually went up in a JN4 Jenny biplane to take aerial photos, and this video must have been from that day. A soggy opening day on December 6, 1926. Despite the rain, about 1,000 people showed up to check out one of the first master plan communities in Orange County. Now, here is Ole Hansen and his sales team at North Beach awaiting the train's arrival to greet potential buyers. This location became the first full-fledged train station, opening in 1928 and closing just a mere 10 years later. At the same time Ole Hansen was selling his Spanish village by the sea, Edward Doheny was doing the same thing in Capistrano Beach. Doheny, like Hansen, provided all kinds of amenities to entice his buyers. This included a Spanish colonial-style beach club and a 1,200-foot-long pleasure pier. Not far behind Hansen and Doheny was Sidney Woodruff, seen here selling lots for Dana Point in 1927. Well, it looks like everyone wore hats in the 20s. They say proof is in the pudding. Here's a shot of my dad and my great-grandfather that very same year. He, like most in the photo, were wearing a Great Gatsby-style straw boater hat. Now, none of the cities, including San Clemente, would have gotten off the ground if it were not for the paved highways made for a population that was becoming increasingly mobile. I know by that time my mom was able to drive all the way down from Crestline with her parents to visit the local area in the 30s. Now, this shot was taken in the mid-20s and shows the construction of the Capistrano Y. Check out the future site of Doheny State Park. In 1931, it would become California's first state beach. Oops. Hey, well, check out Beach Road between the power poles in the background. You could pick up a lot on the beach there for about $500 at that time. Imagine that. Now, the first two structures built in town by Ole Hansen were the sales office and the gas station. Not only did potential buyers need to fill up their tank, the construction crew needed gas as well. This is Holloway's Associated Products, located on Algodon and El Camino Real in 1929. It even offered aviation fuel, of all things. It appears that most of the gas stations in town were the same company, Associated Products, which I suppose makes sense. Now, Ole Hansen also created a riding academy where residents got together and rode their horses around town and along the more than 17 miles of bridle trails. As you can see, they also enjoyed riding on the beach. On the left-hand side is Ole Hansen, his wife, and I think it's his grandson, Bob Hansen. Now, in this next little short clip, you can see Ole Hansen with pretty much the same crew. There's Ole in the lead, followed by his grandson on the white horse. The riding academy and stables were located where the Ralph's grocery store currently is on El Camino Real. Ole Hansen's goal of creating a playground of sorts for residents included a beautiful 9-hole golf course and a clubhouse. The back nine wasn't added until 1966. Again, built by Ole Hansen and investors, and then donated to the residents for just $1. This is an awesome shot looking north from the pier bowl towards 204 Point, and this photo I think is looking back up to the house where I think the photographer snapped the last shot. At the top right you can see the Vista de los Olas, or View of the Waves, which was built in 1927. I believe the San Clemente Historical Society is currently working to preserve this house. The San Clemente Social Club was one of the earliest structures built by Hansen. Ole's son Lloyd said that during Prohibition they would hide bootleg liquor in the palm trees so they could sneak outside for a cigarette and a swig. Now, the plunge, or the Ole Hansen pool as we called it, was opened in May of 1928. I know that I took swimming lessons at this pool in the early 60s, and the pool had changed very little since that time. Although they boasted that it was an Olympic-sized swimming pool, it was only 35 yards long. I remember swimming showing up for a high school dual meet at the pool and watching them scratch their heads. In 1932, they held the Olympic trials for swimming and diving here at the plunge. This included Buster Crabbe, who would go on and win both a gold medal in the 100 freestyle and later join the former Olympic champion Johnny Weissmuller and become another Tarzan in Hollywood. This is an amazing aerial photo showing El Camino Real running up the left side and North Beach area in the foreground. The baseball diamond you see was built in 1927 and initially used for spring training by the Seattle Indians, a team in the Pacific League. San Clemente would soon create its own Pacific League baseball team in 1927. Here is a great team shot of San Clemente's team in the early 30s. Certainly someone must recognize someone there. Now, you won't find this field now. After World War II, this location became San Clemente's first housing tract. I'm pretty sure, though, that the building that used to house visiting players is currently an apartment building on the alley paralleling El Camino Real, or at least I remember it being there. Every city worth its salt had a public park, and San Clemente was no exception. This, like all of the other amenities built by Hansen's syndicate, was sold to the city later for $1. Across the street from the park was San Clemente's first grammar school, later referred to as Las Palmas. The school opened in 1927, but before that, about a dozen or so students were taught by San Clemente's first teacher, Bernice Eyre. Now, here's a photo from 1935. I think it said 3rd grade. Looks like a scene out of Our Gang. Check them out. I wonder what she's thinking or what she's looking at. Now, I think my favorite guy is down here on the bottom right side. Well, I oughta. Here is my first grade class photo 27 years later in one of the original Las Palmas classrooms. In 1935, I read a school lunch of milk, soup, and crackers cost about a nickel. I think it was about a quarter when I was there. Now, probably the most enduring and most recognizable remnant from Ole Hansen's master plan has to be the San Clemente Pier. They began construction in 1927 and was completed the following year. Little did they know that it would be destroyed just 11 years later. I can only imagine what fishing must have been like in the 1920s. Check out the Casa Romanica there, Ole Hansen's home overlooking the pier. They say timing is everything. I wonder what San Clemente would look like if the stock market crash had not sidelined Ole Hansen's plans. Both his house and his eldest son, seen directly below the casa there, were lost as a result of the Great Depression. And during the 30s, San Clemente's population decreased by over 60%. And you might imagine that was mostly the middle-class families as well. Here's another shot looking up at the Casa Romanica, taken at about the same time. You can see the cars winding up the hill. It looks like the Depression couldn't stop people from coming down to the beach, though. This shot at the top of Del Mar in El Camino Real must have been taken in early 1927. The big building you see there is the Bartlett building, and it housed a general store, a hardware store, a barber shop, a pool hall, lunch counter, and San Clemente Cafe. I suppose it was San Clemente's first mini mall. Oh, with apartments above to boot, all funded by Hansen. I think this shot was taken sometime in late 1928 when they were completing the pier. I think you can see a pile driver at the end of the pier. Right out of view at the bottom of this photo is San Clemente's first gas station. This is also the location where the Oscar Easley building would be built in 1929. Now here's what our sister town of Dana Point looked like at about the same time. You can see the canyon there that led down to Fisherman's Cove and Princess Point. In this old 16mm home movie of my grandfather's, you can see Princess Point there. It's sandwiched in between the other 2 points, Dana Point being in the background. Now there's Malcolm and I about 30 years later in almost the same location. We're sporting our brand new wetsuits from Black Bart's and Dana Point. In the 70s, I remember talking to Dorothy Fuller, and she mentioned that her father was vice president of the bank during the Depression and had to foreclose on Ole Hansen and his son. She mentioned that when she told him, Ole Hansen broke down in tears, and so did her father. Now, unfortunately, the Bartow home overlooking the pier no longer exists. When a builder was denied a permit to demolish the structure in 1972, they simply showed up in the middle of the night with a bulldozer and leveled the house. The event did, however, lead to the creation of the San Clemente Historical Society. In 1933, a 6.4 quake hit the Southland and destroyed the home of Thomas Murphy, one of Hansen's business partners and first mayor of San Clemente. But portions of the mansion were rescued and reconstructed at the newly formed San Clemente State Park, and you can see parts of that structure as the cottage to this day. By the end of the 1930s, with World War II on the horizon, San Clemente remained a sleepy little beach town with a population hovering at about 500. But it wasn't going to stay that way for long. In the 1940s, a number of events would have a huge impact on the city. In 1942, Camp Pendleton was created, introducing San Clemente to young Marines from around the United States. Who would want to return here and build a home and a life? By the end of the 1930s, the area around Pico was known as Reeves Ranch, and it was the location of the city's first industrial businesses like Reeves Rubber. In the 60s, Reeves Rubber made this bouncy ball called a Super Ball, and I know it was sold all over the world. Now, the 30s also saw the end to the San Clemente Pier, which was destroyed by El Cordonazo in 1939. Now, in this photograph, You can see the San Clemente Pier. It's been rebuilt. I can see the T section at the end that they added when they rebuilt the pier. I can see some fishing boats out there, probably some big kelp beds, low tide at T Street. Man, look at all that sand. This shot of the pier is a little deceptive. I know that the San Clemente Historical Society said that the T was added after they rebuilt the pier in 1939, but boy, you look at the cars there and that schooner sitting off the end of the pier, sure makes me think that it might be in the 30s, but I'll stick with the society. The 1950s saw the beginning of the first population boom in San Clemente. Following the war, many that were stationed at Camp Pendleton decided to make San Clemente their new home. In this shot, you can see many of the structures that are currently being renovated as part of the North Beach revitalization project. You can see the bowling alley, which was built in 46, the casino built in 37, and the Miramar Theater, which was built in 1938. In this shot, looking along El Camino Real, you can see that there's really very little construction on the east side of El Camino Real. It looks like a lot of the area was still being used for agricultural purposes. I'm sure that the grazing cattle made a habit of wandering down to the fence line. You can see that on the right-hand side there, we zoom in just a little bit right here, you can see a little zigzagging trails that are made by the cattle on the hillside. The remnants of these cow trails, you can still see them in many of the hillsides. This shot, taken in about 1950 looking north along the Coast Highway, shows what the beach looked like before the trailer park was created in the late 50s. All of that vegetation helped to hold the soil and help prevent erosion, something our beaches don't have anymore. As we zoom in, you can see homes that are built along Beach Road there in the distance. The Shore Cliffs housing tract and the Shore Cliffs Beach Club would not be built for probably about another 10 years after the photo was taken. When I first saw this shot of North Beach train station, I was intrigued with the two Santa Fe Railroad cars. With a little research, I discovered these cars were known as rail diesel cars, also known as the RDC or Bud car. It was a self-propelled diesel passenger train produced between 1949 and 1962. I wonder what that building was on the beach. Well, here's a great shot to end with. A day at the beach, at North Beach as it were, with Barry Berg and family. Check out all of that kelp on the beach. This must have been taken after the last shot. I don't see the house on the beach. It would have been directly behind them at this point. I think if you look closely, you can see what was left of the North Beach train station in the far back right. With the 60s fast approaching, this sleepy little beach town was going to be discovered by a whole new group of post-World War II baby boomers, like me and my brother. Hey, if you're interested in history, especially San Clemente's unique story, think about supporting the San Clemente Historical Society. Just a thought. Well, again, thanks for watching. Aloha.